More than a century after it sank, the Titanic is still probably the most famous ship in the world. It set out on its maiden voyage, carrying passengers to New York in 1912, when it hit an iceberg and sank. Whilst it was sinking, a surreal scene was happening on board, as the musicians continued to play to try and bring some calm to the horror and terror going on the ship. The band leader was Wallace Hartley playing the violin, and he came from here in Colne, near Pendle in Lancashire, and the town celebrates their hero. The Titanic, built in Belfast, was launched on the 31st of May, 1911. The passenger liner was the largest and grandest in the world. In 1912, the ship left Belfast for Southampton for its maiden voyage with passengers to New York. The ship was captained by Edward Smith, a man with 38 years of experience on board ships. On board were 2,207 people. Amongst these were some of the richest people in the world. They were safe in the knowledge that the Titanic was unsinkable. On the evening of 14th of April 2012, around 11:40 p.m, a sudden 100-foot high towering wall of ice appeared in front of the ship in the Atlantic Ocean. Too late to turn, the Titanic crashed into it. A huge gash appeared in the hull and saw the water of the Atlantic pour through into the ship. There were 16 lifeboats on board, but these could only take around half the passengers. 12:45 in the morning these were launched. In an hour, the atmosphere on the ship had turned to one of chaos, horror and fear, and as the last lifeboat left, the remaining passengers were told, "It's every man for themselves." Through this terror, though, a surreal scene unfolded as the 8 musicians on the Titanic continued playing, trying to keep spirits high. The band leader of the musicians was violinist Wallace Hartley, playing the instrument that he'd been playing since 15 years old. For the last 3 years he had been an on-board musician and travelled 80 voyages on ships. At 2:20 a.m. on the 15th, just 2.5 hours after the ship had crashed into the iceberg, the ship slid beneath the waves. Wallace Hartley and the band had still been playing up to the end, and the final song they played was the hymn, "Nearer, My God, to Thee." 1,500 people lost their lives in the disaster. So the Wallace Hartley story begins here on Greenfield Road in Colne. He was born at number 92 in 1878. I'm not too sure how far on it is. It doesn't have a blue plaque and there were people living in it, so I'm not going to get probably too close. We'll just have a little bit further on, see if these are the right numbers, hopefully. So yeah, so the middle one there is number 92, pretty much in the middle, and that was Hartley's birthplace. I imagine this place has changed considerably. I don't think there would have been a Starbucks drive-through at the end of the road back then. Okay, behind me is 90 Albert Road, and there is a blue plaque on the door there. This is one of the places Wallace Hartley lived. here in Colne. It's very noisy, sorry. Roughly 17 years old, Hartley left Colne around 1896 and made his official home in Dewsbury. While still in Colne as a child, he'd attended the Bethel Independent Methodist Chapel, and after school worked at the Craven and Union Bank. In 1903, he joined the Huddersfield Philharmonic Orchestra, and then in 1909 had started going on ships with the band. At home was Maria Robinson, whom he'd proposed to often, but the ship's voyages obviously kept him at sea. However, he saw the potential that playing as band leader on the Titanic could lead to future bigger work, so he decided to do one last voyage. Okay, so I'm now on Albert Road in Colne, and it's kind of the main road through, and behind me is the memorial to Wallace Hartley. And Hartley, we've just passed a blue plaque on a house. It was too noisy to film much, but that is here. And further up Albert Road we find the Wallace Hartley Memorial next to the Titanic. This particular area is called the Gables. There's the War Memorial next to me. Let's have a look at the memorial. So there is a bust of Wallace Hartley, and further down, Wallace Hartley, bandmaster of the Titanic, who perished in the foundering of that vessel April 15th, 1912. And this was put up by voluntary contributions. I think this was erected in 1915. Yeah, fabulous. So just next to the memorial is the War Memorial here. Quite an impressive structure. Can't film it properly, so I get further back. The sun gets rid of it. Just over here, a guitar. I don't know who this is a tribute to. Also on Albert Road is a Wetherspoon named the Wallace Hartley. There he is on the sign. Okay, let's see if we can find the final resting place of Wallace Hartley. So now we find ourselves in Colne Cemetery, and this is the burial location of Wallace Hartley. This is quite a stunning graveyard. Actually, it seems to appear because we've walked through the main street. It's been very noisy, and all of a sudden we're here next to the chapel, and yeah, it's quite peaceful, if not just a bit windy. However, Wallace Hartley's body was found at sea 2 weeks after the Titanic sank. He was said to still be in his band leader uniform, and his violin case was strapped to his back. His body was brought back here, and it's said that 40,000 people lined the streets of Colne as the funeral procession came through. I don't know exactly where his grave is, but it's not a huge graveyard, so we'll have a walk around and see if we can find him. It's an absolutely beautiful graveyard, this. Incredibly well kept all the way top to bottom. What a view. Just amazing. So if you decide to come and pay your respects to Wallace Hartley, you literally come straight through the centre of the chapel there, down a very steep path. Be careful if it's icy, I imagine. And if you look to your left as you come down, you will find the gravestone of Wallace Hartley. Wallace and the rest of the musicians were regarded as heroes of the day due to the way they conducted themselves whilst tragedy and chaos was unfolding. A selfless act to try and calm the scene around them. Witnesses who survived claimed Wallace and the band truly did play Nearer My God to Thee. It's unknown whether Wallace truly did say to the rest of the band, "Gentlemen, I bid you farewell," before they were dragged under the waves. None of the band members survived. Okay, so there we are. That is the grave of Wallace Hartley, the band leader of the Titanic, the band on the Titanic. And obviously it tells you there, died on April 15th, 1912. That was about something like 20 past 2 in the morning when the ship eventually went down. And as we know, all the band was still on the ship in those last moments. Nearer My God to Thee is written on this hymn book. That is said to be the last song that they played as the ship sank. I presume by then they probably knew that was the end of their day, for want of a better description, sorry. And of course the violin just at the bottom here, if you can see it, and flowers still being brought to remember Wallace today, all these years later. Yeah, it's great that Colne celebrates somebody who is a hero. You know, they could have tried to abandon ship, but they didn't. They stayed and played. And of course, over the years, there have been films about the Titanic, including, of course, the most famous one from 1997 with Leonardo DiCaprio, but Wallace Hartley and the band always appear in those films as well, and their part in the Titanic story will never be forgotten. Obviously it's very apt that the gravestone has a violin, and that could be the end of the Wallace Hartley story. After all the memorials and the tributes, maybe in a century he would have been remembered, and of course he was in 2012, the centenary of the sinking. But just about the same time, Wallace Hartley hit the news once more, and it's all to do with his violin. Because in March 2013, Hartley's violin appeared at an auction. Hartley had been found in the sea with the violin strapped to his back, and this had been passed to his partner Maria. When she passed away, the violin ended up with various other people and groups before resurfacing in an attic. For 7 years, auctioneers did evidence gathering to prove that it actually belonged to Hartley. They couldn't just presume that the plaque on it and the initials WHH were genuine, but once proven, it went for auction. The violin sold for £900,000 at the auction and is now on display at the Titanic Belfast Museum. It's unlikely that interest in the Titanic will ever fade, and there are museums and exhibitions across the world to this day. So there we go, folks. That is the story of, well, some of the story of Wallace Hartley, the band leader of the Titanic. Apologies if occasionally you've not heard me due to the wind or the noise on the road. It's my own fault. Danny did give me a microphone for Christmas, and 3 months on I'm still not wearing it. Apologies, a lot of you put "we can't hear you." I need to learn to do it. So thanks so much for joining us, and it has been a pleasure. See you next time.